What I am is the Indian who can't die. I'm the worst dream America ever had. Last week I finished The Buffalo Hunter by Stephen Graham Jones, and this is by far my favorite vampire novel I have read in my entire life. I love vampires, just so I can get that out of the way immediately. I have been interested in vampires since I was a pretty young person. I think the first ever vampire thing I interacted with was probably the Lost Boys, if I remember correctly. And ever since, I've just been vampire obsessed. I think they're one of the coolest mythical creatures out there. I love Dracula. I love Sinners. I love Nosferatu. I love vampire stories. I even, kind of guiltily enjoy Twilight, at least the first movie. The rest I'm not so hot on. So going into this, I had high expectations because I love vampire stories. And I heard that this one was pretty good. And it was also very different. And it blew me away. It blew me away. I don't know what my expectations were, but it was completely blown out of the water. And this is probably the most original vampire story I've read besides Dracula. And it's also just one of my favorites, if not my favorite I've read. So if you have not heard of The Buffalo Hunter, let me just give you a little synopsis of what we're looking at. This is a horror novel, by the way. This is a horror historical novel based out in Montana, I think during the year 1912, if I remember correctly. And it follows the story of this Native American named Goodstab, who is turned into a vampire after his people are killed in mass and driven to desperate measures, and he goes on a revenge spree, killing the settlers and buffalo hunters who have killed his people. And it's all about this cycle of revenge, westward expansion, what manifests destiny, and the things that happen to the Native American population during the 18th and 19th century. And it is a brutal book. I will just say that immediately. If you are triggered by violence, genocide, mass murder, and just sorrow, if you just don't want to read a heavy book right now, can't say I recommend this one, because this is a very, very heavy topic. And it's even heavier because it's written by a Native American, Stephen Graham Jones. I believe is Blackfoot himself. I could be misremembering, but I believe he's Blackfoot himself. And you can just kind of feel that difference here in this novel. I always think that novels about certain racial issues or social issues are much, 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 much more real, coming from the voices who have been on the wrong side of that oppression, and that is certainly true about The Buffalo Hunter and Stephen Graham Jones. This is a really, really heavy book, but it's also really, 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 and I mean really good. It's very, very well told, and there's a lot of reasons that I like this novel, and I think it's my favorite vampire story. First of all, the plot itself is really incredible. I kind of gave you the overview, but it's a vampire revenge story, and I love revenge stories, and I love vampires. And you get that in this, and it's very different than any vampire story I've ever read in my life. It is heavily influenced by Native American mythology, so this is not going to be your traditional vampire. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but it's a very different take on the European vampire. It's very much steeped in Native American myth. And for that, I think it makes it very distinct. So the mythology here is cool. The plot is really cool, but the characters are also really cool, especially Goodstab, who is the kind of main subject character. There are 3 distinct narrators in this. All of them are very different. They're all connected in some sort of way. Again, don't want to give it away, what's going on here. But there's the main 2 characters are this priest and Goodstab. Goodstab is doing his confession to this priest. But Goodstab really is the heart of this novel, and he is a really, really interesting character. He is I don't know. Like I would almost describe him kind of, once he becomes a vampire, akin to the Fiend from Frankenstein. He is this, social outcast who believes he can never come back in. He is just filled with all these regrets and all these sorrows, and it's just palpable on the page. Stephen Graham Jones is able to capture this character who is very different than our traditional heroes or villains. It's very much steeped in the time that he's writing, and obviously this person, he's just from a very different background than what I traditionally read. This guy, Goodstab, he believes in these Native American beliefs. He uses language that, it's some of it's English, but a lot of it, sometimes he's using terms that the Blackfoot's used or whatever. And it's very interesting to see how he goes about this novel, and what he thinks of himself and about society and what he's just generally going through. It's very, very well done. So the character work is really, really great, especially with Goodstab. I think the priest is also really cool. I've really liked his angle. I'm a big fan of putting religion in books, so that's cool. There's a lot of Native American mythology in here. If you're someone who doesn't know a lot of Native American mythology, you're going to be introduced to some of it, and I found that really fascinating because, again, I'm unfortunately very ignorant about Native American history for the most part. I have a general understanding, but I'm no expert. So this novel was very, very different for me in that kind of way. Besides the plot and the characters, the themes here are also really incredible, and I think it's kind of what makes this novel. Again, this is a very uncomfortable topic, especially if you're American, because as Americans, we don't like to think about it, but the truth is, the founding of this nation, how it was created, is on the backs of genociders, of people who committed mass murder, whether that was on purpose, like, people like, General Custer or whatever, or the, pioneers, or if it was by accident because of the spread of disease. It doesn't really matter. This nation was historically founded on the genocide of Native Americans, including entire tribes that have just been wiped out. There is no certain tribes anymore. Obviously, Blackfoot is not one of them, but that is the theme of this book. It's about colonization. It's about being pushed out by a different race. It's about the buffaloes being hunted to near extinction, what that did to the Native Americans and their food source and how they lived. And that might upset some people because it talks about those things. It might offend people because it's trying to tackle these very serious topics. But for me, it really, really works. And it made me deeply sad reading this book. I'll be honest, this is a emotionally very heavy book. I've read a lot of very emotionally heavy novels. I'm not going to say that this is the most emotionally heavy novel I've ever read, but it's up there. It's really up there. But for me, I really appreciated it because not only is it there is that, very cool vampire story, but it also ties into some real historical basis that makes this novel have a little bit more bite, if you don't mind my pun. It really has that feeling of, wow, this is different, and this is more real, and this is a very different take on a vampire, and yet it ties into so much of the European idea of what a vampire is and what Bram Stoker was going for in Dracula, of these ideas of, the vampire was the, step in for the foreigner and what that does to us. And it's a very interesting twist on that concept. So yeah, it's just a great novel. I don't know what else to say. Like, it really is just wonderfully crafted. If you are a big fan of vampires, I think you're going to really appreciate this. If you're a big fan of horror, I think you're really going to appreciate this. If you want to kind of introduce yourself to some more outside the box horror, if you want to get past just people like, Stephen King or whatever, and you want to introduce yourself to, people of color, I think this would be a great way of doing it. For me, it's literally just one of the strongest vampire novels I've ever read in my entire life. It blows Dracula out of the water. respectfully, and blows Salem's Lot out of the water, respectfully. So nothing but praise for me from this one. I'm going to give it like a 8.8 out of 10. It's probably the best book I've read all year. It was just gas. I loved it.